carved it everywhere, into limestone, into walls, into ceiling, not to decorate it, not to mark territory. Then they carved it into themselves, and they didn't stop when it hurt. Shoulder blades, femurs, ribs, each cut deep enough to scar, each scar given time to heal, before they cut again. The same descending spiral, over and over, until the pattern wasn't something they made anymore. It was something they became. What kind of belief makes pain part of the design? In the summer of 2011, a team of speleologists funded by the Instituto Geológico y Minero de España was conducting a systematic survey of unmapped cave systems in the Cantabrian Mountains of northern Spain. The project had been ongoing for 3 years. The region is riddled with limestone caves, thousands of them, carved by underground rivers over millions of years. Most remain unexplored, hidden beneath centuries of rockfall and vegetation, accessible only to experienced climbers willing to rappel down cliffsides or crawl through narrow passages that might lead nowhere. The team had already documented 47 caves in this particular valley. Most were shallow, natural shelters no more than 10 meters deep. A few showed signs of prehistoric occupation, charcoal stains near entrances, scattered stone tools, the remains of ancient fires. Nothing unusual, nothing that hadn't been seen in dozens of other caves across the region. On July 14th, Dr. Elena Marquez and her team discovered a narrow opening approximately 30 meters above a dry riverbed. The entrance was small, partially collapsed, obscured by hanging vegetation. Easy to miss. It took 2 days to widen it enough for a person to enter safely, removing loose stones and reinforcing the opening with timber supports. And when Dr. Marquez finally descended into the darkness with nothing but a headlamp, a measuring tape, and a camera, she found herself standing at the edge of a circular chamber that hadn't been disturbed in over 23,000 years. The chamber was approximately 12 meters in diameter. The ceiling rose to nearly 4 meters at its highest point. The floor was relatively flat, unusual for a natural cave formation, which typically shows erosion patterns, water channels, or debris accumulation. The air was still, dry, undisturbed, and every surface, walls, ceiling, even portions of the floor, was covered in the same symbol, a spiral, carved deep into the limestone, descending clockwise, repeated, again and again and again. Dr. Marquez counted 27 spirals in her first sweep of the chamber. By the end of the week, her team had documented 427, each one between 15 and 30 centimeters in diameter, each carved to a depth of approximately 3 to 5 millimeters, deep enough to be permanent, shallow enough to require precision rather than force. But that wasn't what made her hands shake when she radioed the surface. It was what lay in the center of the room. 13 people, arranged in a spiral formation, each body lying on its side, each facing inward toward a central point, each separated by exactly the same distance. Their bones had collapsed over millennia, ribs settling into the sediment, vertebrae separating, skulls tilting, but the positions were unmistakable, geometric, precise, measured. And as Dr. Marquez moved closer, shining her light across the skeletal remains, she saw something else. Marks on the bones, shallow grooves, carved into shoulder blades, into femurs, into ribs, into ulnas, the same spiral, the same descending pattern that covered the walls, etched into human bone, into their bodies. This is the story of 13 people who spent months preparing for something they knew would be permanent. 23,000 years ago, the Cantabrian region of northern Spain was one of the last refugees during the peak of the last glacial maximum. While ice sheets covered much of Europe, extending as far south as modern-day Berlin, this coastal corridor remained survivable. Cold, yes. Harsh, certainly, but not uninhabitable. The region supported small populations of reindeer, ibex, and wild horses. Rivers flowed year-round, fed by glacial melt from the Pyrenees. Caves provided shelter from wind and snow. This was territory occupied by late Solutrean populations, anatomically modern humans, who had survived and adapted to some of the harshest conditions our species has ever faced. The Solutrean culture, named after the site of Solutré in France, is known for producing some of the most sophisticated stone tools of the Upper Paleolithic. They created laurel leaf blades, pressure-flaked bifacial points so thin and precisely worked that modern knappers struggle to replicate them. These weren't crude tools. These were works of art that also happened to be functional. They hunted reindeer, ibex, and wild horses using atlatls and spear throwers, weapons that extended the range and power of the human arm. They built semi-permanent shelters from hide and wood frames, returning to the same seasonal camps year after year. They created portable art, carved figurines from mammoth ivory, engraved stones with geometric patterns, shaped bone into needles and awls. They painted deep inside caves, animals in motion, hand stencils, abstract symbols, and they understood the body as more than just flesh. Evidence from Solutrean sites across France and Spain shows intentional body modification. Filed teeth creating deliberate gaps, scarification patterns on bones suggesting repeated cutting, perforated bones used as jewelry threaded through healed piercings. The body could be marked, changed, made meaningful, but they also understood caves as something beyond shelter. Caves were liminal spaces, thresholds between the world of the living and whatever lay beyond. Most caves in this region show evidence of temporary occupation. Fire pits near entrances where smoke could escape and light could penetrate. Tool-making debris, flakes of flint, broken blades, hammerstone fragments, animal bones for meals, reindeer femurs split for marrow, horse ribs stripped of meat, ibex skulls cracked open. Places where people came, stayed for days or weeks, and left. But some caves were different. Some caves showed evidence of deeper penetration, paintings and carvings hundreds of meters from daylight, in chambers so remote that reaching them required crawling through narrow passages, wading through underground streams, descending vertical shafts, places that required effort, intention, commitment. And some caves, very few, were sealed, entrances deliberately blocked with stones too large to move easily, but never from the inside, never with people still. Inside, until Cueva de la Espiral. When Dr. Marquez's team began the formal excavation in September 2011, they worked with painstaking care. The chamber was photographed from every angle using high-resolution digital cameras and 3D scanning equipment. Every bone was photographed in situ before being touched. Every stone fragment was cataloged. Every square centimeter of the cave floor was mapped using a grid system, dividing the chamber into sections that could be excavated separately and cross-referenced later. The work took 8 months. The 13 individuals were designated as individuals 1 through 13, numbered from the center outward in the order they appeared in the spiral formation. Individual 1, the figure at the very center, was a child, approximately 8 years old, based on dental development and the fusion of cranial sutures. Sex indeterminate from skeletal remains alone. The child was lying on their left side, facing outward toward the spiral, hands positioned flat against the cave floor as if bracing. The skull had settled forward slightly, but the original position was clear, head tilted up, as if the child had been looking toward the entrance of the chamber as they died. Around this child, arranged in 3 complete rotations, were the other 12, 4 adults in the innermost ring, 5 in the middle ring, 3 in the outer ring. Ages ranged from early 20s, a young woman with fully developed wisdom teeth but minimal wear, to over 60, an elderly male with advanced dental attrition, arthritis in the vertebrae, and healed fractures in the left radius, suggesting an injury decades old. The spacing between each individual was remarkably consistent, 1.2 meters center to center, measured from the center of each skull to the center of the next. The margin of error was less than 5 centimeters across all 13 positions. Dr. Marquez's initial field notes describe the scene with clinical detachment. The arrangement suggests planning. The consistency of spacing indicates measurement. The positions, all on left side, all facing inward, suggest coordination. But the absence of any disturbance, no scattering of bones, no displacement, no signs that anyone moved after assuming their position, suggests they died where they lay, and remained that way. But it was the condition of the bones themselves that revealed how much time this had taken. The spirals weren't just on the walls. They were carved into the skeletons. On the left scapula of individual 4, a woman in her 30s, a shallow groove spiraled clockwise from the top of the bone down toward the spine. The carving was approximately 4 centimeters in diameter. Depth varied from 1 to 3 millimeters. Bone remodeling around the edges indicated healing. New bone growth smoothing the rough edges left by the cutting tool. On the right femur of individual 7, a man in his 50s, the same pattern. A spiral carved into the bone just below the hip joint, healed. On the lower ribs of individual 9, on the ulna of individual 11, on the left clavicle of individual 2. Every single person in that cave bore at least one carved spiral on their skeletal remains. Some had 3, some had 5, and every single carving showed signs of healing. These weren't done quickly. These weren't done all at once. These were progressive modifications done over time, with intervals for healing between each session. In early 2012, Dr. Marquez brought in a multidisciplinary team to analyze every aspect of the site. Osteologists from the Universidad de Cantabria, forensic anthropologists from the Instituto de Medicina Legal, isotope specialists from the Max Planck Institute, paleopathologists, taphonomists, and Dr. Antoine Rousseau, a specialist in Upper Paleolithic symbolism from the Université de Bordeaux. What they discovered over the next 2 years painted a picture of a process that unfolded over months, possibly longer. First, the family structure. DNA analysis confirmed that the 13 individuals were part of the same extended family group, maternal haplogroup U5, common in European Paleolithic populations, multiple generations. Grandparents, parents, children. 3 of the adults showed genetic markers indicating they were siblings. 2 of the children were offspring of one of those siblings. This wasn't a random group brought together by circumstance. This was a family. Isotope analysis of tooth enamel revealed they had all spent their childhoods within a 30-kilometer radius of the cave. Strontium isotope ratios matched the local geology. Limestone bedrock with traces of volcanic ash from ancient eruptions. They had grown up here. They knew this landscape. They knew these caves. And they had chosen this one. Second, the health status. Skeletal analysis showed no signs of acute trauma, infectious disease, or malnutrition that would have caused death directly. No broken bones except for old healed fractures, the kinds of injuries common in active populations. No periosteal reactions indicating systemic infection. No parodic hyperostosis suggesting anemia or dietary deficiency. Their teeth showed normal wear for their ages, consistent with a diet of meat and plant material processed with stone tools. They had been healthy when they entered the cave. Whatever killed them, it wasn't illness or injury that preceded their arrival. Third, the timeline of the bone modifications. Forensic analysis of the carved spirals revealed something remarkable. The grooves hadn't been carved all at once. Microscopic examination of the cut marks showed different stages of healing. Some spirals were fully healed, smooth bone growth completely covering the original cut, with only a faint depression visible on the surface. Some were partially healed, new bone forming along the edges, but the center of the groove still rough and unmodified, and some showed no healing at all. Sharp edges, fresh cuts, no bone remodeling. The pattern suggested the carvings had been done over the course of at least 8 to 12 weeks, possibly longer. The first spiral carved. Time given for healing, at least 2 to 3 weeks for bone remodeling to begin. Then another spiral carved. More time for healing. Then another. As if the marking of the body wasn't a single event but a progressive ritual, something that required endurance, commitment, and time. Fourth, chemical analysis of the cave sediment. Soil samples taken from around the bodies revealed traces of organic compounds that shouldn't have been there. Residues consistent with plant-based oils, possibly from seeds or nuts crushed and mixed with water. Traces of ochre, iron oxide pigment commonly used in Paleolithic contexts for body painting and ritual marking. And something unexpected, traces of psychoactive alkaloids related to modern henbane, a plant known to induce trance states, alter perception, and reduce sensitivity to pain. The concentrations were low, barely detectable, but consistent across multiple sample sites. Ethnobotanists consulted on the analysis confirmed that similar compounds appear in shamanic contexts across Eurasia, used to facilitate altered states, spiritual journeys, and ritualized endurance of pain. The presence of these compounds suggested preparation, not just physical preparation, carving walls and bodies, but chemical preparation, altering consciousness, reducing fear. Fifth, the progression on the walls. Dr. Rousseau spent 6 months mapping every spiral in the cave using high-resolution photogrammetry, 427 spirals in total. And he discovered something unexpected. The spirals weren't uniform in quality. The carvings near the entrance, the first 20 to 30 spirals, were shallow, rough, inconsistent in size and depth. Lines wavered. Spacing was uneven. Some spirals were incomplete, abandoned halfway through, as if carved by hands still learning the motion. But as you moved deeper into the cave, the quality improved. Lines became straighter, spirals became more uniform, depth became consistent. By the time you reached the chamber where the bodies were found, the spirals were precise, confident, deep, carved by practiced hands. Dr. Rousseau's analysis. The cave shows a learning curve. The individuals who carved these walls were not expert carvers when they began. They became expert carvers through repetition. The progression from rough to refined suggests weeks, possibly months, of sustained effort, meaning they had spent time here, not just hours, not just days, weeks, carving, practicing, refining, before the final arrangement. Sixth, the distribution of the carvings. The spirals weren't evenly distributed around the chamber. They were concentrated directly above where each of the 13 bodies lay. Dr. Rousseau overlaid a map of the wall carvings with the floor plan. The correlation was exact. Each cluster of spirals on the walls marked the spot where a body would eventually rest. Individual 1, the child at the center, was positioned directly beneath the densest concentration of spirals. 47 spirals carved into a 2 square meter section of the ceiling above. Individual 7, one of the eldest adults, lay beneath a section with 32 spirals. The outermost individuals, the youngest adults, lay beneath sections with 12 to 15 spirals each. The walls weren't decoration. They were a blueprint, a map showing where each person would lie. Seventh, what wasn't in the cave. No tools were found inside the chamber. No stone blades, no burins, no hammerstones, no bone tools, no antler punches, no fire pit, no charcoal, no ash, no food remains, no animal bones, no plant material, no water source, no evidence of moisture beyond the natural humidity of limestone caves. Everything they had used to carve the walls, every tool, every resource, they had taken back out. The chamber contained only what they had decided to leave: stone, bones, spirals. Eighth, the sealed entrance. When structural engineers examined the cave opening, they found limestone blocks, some weighing over 30 kilograms, stacked deliberately in the narrow passage leading to the chamber. The blocks were local limestone, quarried from the cliff face within 50 meters of the entrance. They had been shaped, rough edges knocked off to create flat surfaces that could stack more securely. The positioning made it clear. The stones had been placed from the inside. The gaps between blocks were filled with smaller stones, wedged tightly to prevent shifting. The final stone, the one that would have completed the seal, was found resting against the stack, not yet in position, as if the last person had placed it there but hadn't had the strength or the time to lift it into place. If that detail made you pause, hit the like button. It helps us uncover more buried mysteries. And if you're already thinking of an explanation, leave your theory in the comments below. This community reads every single one. In 2013, Dr. Rousseau conducted an experiment to understand the scope of what had happened in that cave. He recruited a team of volunteers, modern stone knappers experienced in Paleolithic techniques, and asked them to replicate just 10 of the spirals using the same type of limestone and the same tools available to Solotrian populations: flint blades, bone chisels, hammerstone percussion. Each spiral took, on average, 45 minutes to carve to the depth and precision found in Cueva de la Espiral. That's accounting for mistakes, tool dulling, hand fatigue. 427 spirals. At 45 minutes each, that's over 320 hours of carving, roughly 40 full days of 8-hour work. And that's just the walls. The carvings on bone, which required even more precision, more care, more control, would have added dozens more hours. Dr. Rousseau's report includes this observation. The creation of this space was not a single event. It was a sustained project requiring coordination, endurance, and collective commitment over weeks or months. The individuals involved would have needed to return to this cave repeatedly, bringing tools, bringing food, bringing water, carving for hours at a time, then leaving and returning again. Whatever they believed they were creating here, it was worth that investment. Paleopathologists examining the remains made one additional observation that has never been fully explained. The position of the hyoid bones, small fragile bones in the throat that support the tongue and larynx, in 8 of the 13 individuals, suggested they had died with their mouths open, not gaping, not distended, but open in a specific configuration. The angle of the jaw, the position of the tongue, the tension in the hyoid, all suggested sustained vocalization, singing, or chanting, or speaking. The kind of mouth position you would hold for minutes, possibly longer, while producing continuous sound. And the position had remained fixed even after death. The muscles of the jaw contracted, locked, meaning whatever they were doing with their voices, it lasted long enough to become the final position their bodies remembered. Since the excavation concluded in 2014, researchers have proposed several theories to explain why 13 people would spend months preparing a cave, carving their own bodies, and sealing themselves inside to die together. No single theory accounts for everything, but together, they reveal the limits of what we can reconstruct about belief systems 23,000 years old. Theory 1. Prolonged ritual preparation for collective crossing. Some anthropologists, particularly those specializing in circumpolar shamanism, believe the months of preparation were necessary for a successful spiritual transition. In shamanic traditions documented across Eurasia, crossing into the realm of ancestors isn't instantaneous. It requires purification, training, transformation of the body and mind. The progressive carving, both on walls and on skin, could represent stages of that transformation, each spiral marking a step closer to readiness. The presence of psychoactive plant residues supports this interpretation. Many shamanic practices involve the use of consciousness-altering substances to facilitate trance states, vision quests, and communication with spirits. The child at the center would serve as guide, someone unburdened by adult experience, pure enough to lead the others through the passage. In many indigenous traditions, children are believed to exist closer to the spirit world. not yet fully anchored to physical reality. The sustained vocalization as they died fits shamanic practice. Songs or chants meant to guide the spirit, maintain focus, and mark the transition. What it explains: the time investment, transformation, requires preparation. The progressive nature of the carvings, each stage bringing them closer. The inclusion of a child as central figure, a spiritual guide. The lack of panic. They believed they were going somewhere. The psychoactive plant residues, tools for altered consciousness. What it leaves unanswered. If this was a spiritual journey, why seal the entrance? In shamanic practice, the body is meant to remain while the spirit travels and returns. The shaman goes into trance, journeys to other realms, and comes back. These people sealed themselves in as if they never expected to need an exit, as if the journey was meant to be one way. Theory 2. Ritualized response to catastrophic loss. Other researchers suggest the group may have been responding to a crisis, not environmental collapse, but social or emotional devastation. Perhaps the loss of other family members to violence, disease, or accident. Perhaps the breakdown of their community, scattered by conflict, migration, or environmental pressure. Rather than face existence as fragments, they chose to end together. The months of preparation would be their way of transforming what could have been despair into something meaningful. The spirals representing the cycle of life returning to the earth, their bodies feeding the ground for future growth, ensuring that even in death they contributed to continuity. The deliberate, measured approach, weeks of carving, careful arrangement, sustained ritual, would reframe death not as loss, but as completion. What it explains: the inclusion of entire family units, choosing to stay together rather than fragment. The calm, measured approach, death as acceptance, not panic. The choice to go together rather than separately. Unity preserved. What it leaves unanswered: their skeletal remains show no signs of malnutrition, disease, or environmental stress. They were healthy when they entered. If this was a response to loss, why not simply perform funerary rites for those already gone? Why include the living, including children, in that final act? And if this was desperation, why spend months on elaborate preparation instead of immediate action? Grief doesn't usually wait. Theory 3. The logistics of permanence. Dr. Marquez herself has proposed a theory that focuses not on why, but on how. She suggests that the months of preparation reveal something crucial about the nature of this event. They knew exactly what they were doing. The learning curve visible on the walls, from rough attempts to refined precision, shows they practiced until they were skilled. The progressive carvings on bone, done in stages with healing time between, shows they understood that transformation requires time, endurance, repeated commitment. The sealed entrance, stones carefully stacked, gaps filled with precision, shows they anticipated every practical detail. The geometric precision of the final arrangement, 1.2 meters apart, all facing inward, 3 perfect rotations, shows they had rehearsed, they had measured, they had practiced lying in those positions. This wasn't improvisation. Dr. Marquez's observation. We keep asking why they did this. Perhaps the more revealing question is, how did they do this so well? The answer is time, preparation, repetition, and absolute clarity of purpose. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't despair. This wasn't a moment of religious fervor that swept them up and carried them forward before they could think. This was a project, carried out with the same attention, the same patience, the same commitment to precision they would give to building a shelter, planning a hunt, or creating a tool. Whatever they believed would happen in that chamber, they wanted to make sure they did it correctly, and they were willing to invest months to get it right. Here's what the evidence shows. 23,000 years ago, 13 people entered a cave in the Cantabrian Mountains. They were healthy, they were family, they brought tools, and they began carving. 427 spirals on the walls, starting near the entrance, rough, uncertain, learning. moving deeper, gaining confidence, precision, skill. Over 320 hours of work, more than 40 full days of carving. They practiced until their hands knew the motion without thinking, until the spirals were perfect. And while they carved the cave, they carved themselves, one spiral on bone. Time to heal. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, another spiral. More healing. At least 8 weeks, possibly 12, possibly longer. Each person bearing the marks. Each person returning to the cave again and again to add another spiral to the walls and to their own bodies. And when the walls were finished, when 427 spirals covered every surface, when their bodies were marked and healed and marked again, when everything was prepared, they arranged themselves in 3 perfect rings around a child at the center, 1.2 meters apart, facing inward, hands flat on stone. They sealed the entrance with stones too heavy for one person to move alone, and they began to sing, or chant, for long enough that their jaws remained open even after their bodies stopped. We don't know what they believed would happen when the singing stopped. We don't know if they expected transformation, or dissolution, or passage to another place. We don't know if they thought the spiral would guide them, or if the spiral was the destination itself. But we know they had months to change their minds. Months of carving, weeks of healing, days of final arrangement. At any point they could have stopped. They could have walked out. They could have sealed the cave and left it empty, a monument to intention without completion. But they didn't. Every spiral on the walls was a choice to keep going. Every spiral on their skin was a commitment renewed. Every stone stacked at the entrance was a door closing that they knew would never open again. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of fear that spiraled out of control. This was months of deliberate, coordinated action by 13 people, 3 generations of the same family, who knew exactly what they were building toward. And when the moment came, when the walls were complete and the carvings had healed and the entrance was sealed, they lay down in their positions. They faced the center. They opened their mouths and sang until there was nothing left but silence and spirals. And 13 people who spent months preparing for something they believed was worth never leaving. The cave is sealed again now. Protected, restricted. The spirals remain. On the walls, on the bones, descending, always descending. Carved by hands that learned through hundreds of hours of repetition how to make them perfect. And 13 people, whose names we will never know, whose voices we will never hear, are still there, in their positions, exactly 1.2 meters apart, exactly where they placed themselves, after months of preparation, waiting for something we may never understand. If this story stayed with you, there are more like it. They became the symbols carved into stone is waiting. Click the video on screen now, or subscribe. We descend deeper into prehistory every week. Every stone remembers a story. This one remembers 13 people who spent months preparing for a single moment. See you in the next mystery.